were not successful in the United States. The United States experiment with mandatory minimums was completely different, in my view, with the Canadian approach. In the United States, sentences are often 10 times what they are, 3 strike rules. We don't have that in Canada. I see my time for the time being has elapsed. I believe I have 2 or 3 minutes that I will finish afterwards. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable Member for Cameron-Thompson-Kerry will have about 2 minutes and a half to complete his speech after the time for oral questions. Statements by members. Déclaration des députés. The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Shaheen Abu Akleh, Gufran Warashne, say their names. Women, Palestinian journalists, killed while doing their jobs, covering what was going on before their eyes, killed by the Israeli military. And somehow even more shocking, their funerals were attacked by the Israeli military. Their pallbearers were blocked as they tried to take them to their place of eternal rest. The Vatican representative in Jerusalem denounced it as brutally violating decades-old agreements to hold Jerusalem sacred to the 3 main theist religions for whom all find spiritual significance in Jerusalem. We must, in this country, say something. We must do something. We call for an independent inquiry into the killing of these 2 brave women, Palestinian journalists. Canada must step up. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Winnipeg South.
Madam Speaker, I want to express my sadness and anger at the horrific terrorist attack that took place in Owo, Nigeria on June 5th, and send my condolences to the families of the victims, to Nigeria, and to our Nigerian community here in Canada. This senseless act of hate occurred at St. Francis Xavier Church as the congregation was gathered for Sunday service. During the closing hymns of their Pentecost celebration, several armed men entered the church and opened fire, killing over 50 men, women, and children. These innocent worshippers were murdered simply because they were practicing their Catholic faith. It is disheartening to see that in many countries around the world, including here in Canada, hate-based violence has been on the rise in recent years. Everyone deserves to feel safe in their community, regardless of their religion, culture, sexual orientation, or ethnicity. Now, more than ever, we must stand together as one human family against hate and intolerance in all its forms. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for South Surrey White Rock.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have the honour of rising in the House today to recognize the South Surrey White Rock Chamber of Commerce, celebrating its 85th anniversary of serving the business community this year. I am a proud member of this organization, and I've enjoyed working with its leadership on multiple occasions to champion local businesses, including popular information town halls during the pandemic lockdowns. The Chamber has always been a community builder, bringing together residents and businesses through unique events and initiatives like Chamber Chats and the Let's Get Local campaign, launched as part of the celebration this year. This campaign is all about supporting and promoting entrepreneurs and local businesses, large and small. It couldn't have come at a better time as Canada recovers from COVID-19. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Vimy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Students in Vimy and across Canada are wrapping up their school year in a few days. I still remember the stressful but exciting weeks of June. There were exams, graduation ceremonies, proms, and the start of the summer holidays. I am proud of the excellent schools, the dedicated teachers and staff that we have in my riding of Vimy, like Laval Junior Academy, École Socrate Démosthène, and École Saint-Maxime. I encourage all students to continue to work hard and to remain curious, because they will become the future leaders who will enrich our society.
And will lead to a better and more fulfilled life. I want to thank all the teachers, school staff, and family members who support our future leaders in their endeavors. To the students of Vimy and across Canada, remember, the sky is the limit, and I wish you a safe and memorable summer.
Bravo.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, ethnic cleansing continues to claim thousands of lives in Tigray, Ethiopia. Tigrayan women are being sexually abused to prevent them from being able to have children. Children are suffering from armed violence and hunger due to a blockade imposed by Amhara militias and the Ethiopian government's forces. While the war in Ethiopia threatens to destabilize the Horn of Africa for the past 2 years, the Tigrayan diasporas in Canada and Quebec have been lobbying for the Canadian government to impose sanctions on the Ethiopian government for crimes against humanity in Tigray. Speaker, we can only admire the courage of the members of the United Tigaroo Canada as these Tigrayan men and women continue to fight for their cause while the Canadian government turns a deaf ear. Tigrayans in Canada and Quebec have a single question for the Canadian government. When will it impose sanctions on the Ethiopian government and demand access to humanitarian aid for Tigrayans? The Honourable Member for Gatineau. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to rise in the House to pay tribute to Ms. Anne Boutin, who is celebrating 35 years of service as Executive Director of an organization that I often visit. It's called La Maison Pointe aux Jeunes in Gatineau. With her determination and daring, Ms. Boutin has dedicated her career to community intervention with teenagers. Since the very beginning of her career, she has carried out many innovative and unifying projects to ensure they can have a healthy and dynamic environment in which to live. Whether it's the bike caravan, the open-air cinemas, or the winter coat distribution project, Ms. Boutin stands out for her sense of humor and her ability to work with young people. On my name and in the name of all my colleagues here in the House, I want to offer her our sincere thanks for her wonderful contribution to young people in Gatineau. Happy 35th year of service.
The Honourable Member for Langley-Aldergrove.
Mr. Speaker, in my riding of Langley-Aldergrove, we celebrate Environment Week by planting trees. Now, mere seedlings for now, but in the process of growing up, they will add beauty to our community and greening for the planet. On Saturday, June 4th, with the help of Langley Environmental Partners Society, we gave away 500 native tree seedlings. Now, admittedly, 500 trees is not nearly as impressive as the 2 billion trees that this government keeps promising again and again, but our trees are real trees that as they grow up, they will add real pleasure and contribute to the greening of our planet. I want to thank our friends at LEPS, Nicole, Carmen, and Ben, and to my volunteers, Jane, Jim, and Elizabeth, and Home Depot for hosting us once again. And of course, a big thank you to the constituents in my riding for celebrating Environment Week in this very real and tangible way. Thank you.
Real trees. The Honourable Member for Scarborough Rouge Park.
Mr. Speaker, languages are at the core of who we are. They're the means through which we express ourselves and our culture, share stories, and pass on knowledge throughout the generations. Languages are at the heart of our cultural identity and integral to our collective well-being. Since colonization, hundreds of Indigenous languages and dialects in Canada have been lost. According to UNESCO, 75% of the remaining 70 Indigenous languages in Canada are endangered. As we mark National Indigenous History Month, I want to thank the elders, knowledge keepers, and teachers of Indigenous languages. I want to honor the resilience of those who persevere to maintain these precious languages. As we continue to march towards reconciliation, I want to highlight the work of the recently appointed Commissioner of Indigenous Languages, Ronald Ignace, who is here in Ottawa today. Let us work together to support Indigenous people's right to self-determination, to maintain, reclaim, and revitalize their languages as a fundamental tenet of reconciliation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Pierrefonds-Dollard. Mr. Speaker, June is CDKL5 Awareness Month.
Resident in my riding, a young girl in Pierrefonds-Dollard suffers from this rare disease. CDKL5 is a neurodevelopmental condition caused by a rare gene mutation. It also is one of the most common forms of genetic epilepsy amongst young girls. Amelia vit avec cette maladie.
Amelia has been living with this disease, and I'm honored to speak today of her courage.
Parents have been making her home accessible for her, fundraising so that her home is safe. Throughout it all, Amelia has been cheerful, spreading love and joy all around her. CDKL5's Awareness Month's motto is Hope, Love, Cure. I encourage Canadians to learn about this order during this month. Merci. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Souris Moose Mountain.
Mr. Speaker, on June 1st and 2nd, the City of Weyburn hosted the Saskatchewan Oil Show 2022. The event was a resounding success, with people coming from all over the country to see and learn about the latest developments in Canada's vital oil industry. Congratulations and thank you to the Chair, Dan Cognett, and all the organizing committee. Unfortunately, one topic often discussed was the astronomical price of gas and the negative impacts it is having on the people of Saskatchewan. With the current price of gas hovering over $2 per litre, people in rural areas are going to have to start choosing between things like driving to work that week or putting food on the table. The people of Souris Moose Mountain deserve more than a Liberal government that sits by and watches them suffer while refusing to use the tools they have available to fix the situation. My constituents and all Canadians deserve a break. And while this Prime Minister continually says he has Canadians' backs, the only thing he has done is twist their backs to the verge of breaking.
Good job. The Honourable Member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, no matter the age, rainbows are a symbol of hope, peace, equality, luck, and new beginnings. And throughout Pride season, we see the rainbow flag proudly displayed across Canada, because Pride is a time to celebrate our differences and, yes, support one another. This Pride season, we join the LGBTQ+ community across Canada. We acknowledge their history, the hardships they have endured, and the progress that has been made while recommitting ourselves to continue building more inclusive communities where everyone is free to be who they are and love whom they love. Mr. Speaker, this evening, youth from across the 905 region will come together to celebrate Pride season in a conversation with our Minister of Tourism. And after a 2-year hiatus, this Saturday, June 18th, residents across York Region will join York Pride to celebrate Pride on the Riverwalk and walk the York Pride Parade. Hope to see you there. Mr. Speaker, happy Pride season, everyone. Love is love, Mr. Speaker.
Good job. The Honourable Member for Red Deer Mountain View.
Mr. Speaker, in their rolling ranch and farmland of Viking, Alberta, came a band of brothers that changed the hockey world forever. They all began their junior careers with our Red Deer Rustlers in the 70s and 80s before moving on to the WHL's Lethbridge Broncos. Their exceptional talents on the ice were only surpassed by their unique knowledge of the game, with 4 of the boys continuing on to apply their trade as managers and coaches. Last week, the NHL Broadcasters Association voted Calgary Flames coach Daryl Sutter as a recipient of this year's Jack Adams Award as NHL Coach of the Year. Daryl took a team that had missed the playoffs the year before to 6th place this year. In typical Daryl fashion, his reaction to the news was to thank family first and then remind everyone how proud he was that his brother Brian, who had won the same award as a young coach in the 90s, was the one to break the news to him. Whether at the rodeo grounds, working the land, or behind the bench, Daryl's unique philosophy of life and excellence always shines through. On behalf of hockey fans everywhere, we congratulate Daryl Sutter on this well-deserved award. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
But a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? That's my father's favorite quote. Darryl Cramp was first elected as a Member of Parliament in 2004. He served until 2015. He then went on to serve as our MPP from 2018 to 2022. My dad is a thinker, a compassionate leader, a statesman, and a man of his word. He is competitive in nature, steadfast in his love of family, and has earned the respect of many. In his time in office, he and his team made a huge impact on the lives of many. He has delivered millions of dollars to our riding. He has proudly represented Canada abroad on many missions. For all of those that know him, you can expect a firm handshake and for him to look you in the eye. He will ask hard but thoughtful questions. He will encourage you to evaluate your why. You can anticipate the love of his life, Carol Ann, his firecracker, my mother, always by his side and often leading the charge. Today, I'm proud to rise in the House to wish my dad and my mentor a very happy birthday, and also to all of the dads out there, may you enjoy a very special Father's Day this weekend.
The Honourable Member for Hochelaga. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had the pleasure to meet with children and young people from Hochelaga who take part in the Rights Committee of the Social Pediatric Centers of the Dr. Julian Foundation, Garage à Musique, and Ruelle Hochelaga. It said that the truth comes out of the mouths of babes, and I promised that I would bring to this House the great ideas they shared with me. And so I would quote them, Mr. Speaker. Caring for those who need to sleep on the streets, people in wheelchairs, and ensure that there is access to buildings and streets for those wheelchairs, have more soccer fields, basketball courts, water parks, more swimming pools, greener neighborhoods, and please tell people not to pollute so much and change their cars. There's not enough safety. Parks and alleys aren't safe enough, but also what the young people want is to ensure that adults listen better to them and allow student councils to make decisions. Mr. Speaker, these children spoke out on issues that are important to the people in Hochelaga, but also across the country, and I invite all my colleagues to meet with the young people and children in their ridings. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Rosemount Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, I've been an MP for 11 years, and I've never seen anything like this. The government's services to the public are beyond bad. They are a disaster. People have to get up and line up at 3 a.m. to try to get their passports. A woman in Rosemount Petite Patrie has been waiting for an EI check since February. It's now June. And have you ever tried to reach someone at Service Canada? There's a better chance of winning the lottery. We have the case file of a nurse from abroad who's going to lose his work permit because his application for permanent residency has not been processed on time. Let's be clear. We could lose a nurse in our healthcare system because Immigration Canada is not doing its job. There are hundreds of such cases. Our businesses are tearing their hair out. People are living in uncertainty and anxiety. One of the main essential tasks of the government is to provide good services in a timely manner. I'm asking the Liberal government to get its act together and, out of respect for everyone, to put the resources in place to make sure that it works. The Honourable Member for Beloeil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, René Lévesque's legacy can be defined with the word dignity, sometimes a messy dignity, but one that always makes perfect sense. In an inspiring and timeless conclusion, he embodies Quebec values even 35 years after his death, even 100 years after his birth. The René Lévesque Foundation launched the commemoration of the centenary yesterday in Montreal under the honorary presidency of a former leader in this parliament, Mr. Lucien Bouchard, to whom I pay tribute. We saw during this event sparks of what we believe to have been, uniquely in their own way, but with great common features, sparks of the life of René Lévesque, a life that was magnified by the people of my generation, but unknown to those for whom René Lévesque is only a black and white photo in the books of in the pages of a history book that is no longer taught. What a good opportunity to better acquaint young people with this unique giant and his love for Quebecers, to the point of sacrificing everything to try to give them a country of their very own. The future lasts a very long time, he liked to say, and it's only just begun for Quebec. Thanks to René Lévesque. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Mr. Speaker, airports are in chaos, the passport office is snowed under, inflation is out of control, ministers are misleading Parliament, and this government's current priorities are an incoherent mess. C5, a bill that drops sentencing requirements on violent offenders and drug traffickers and opens the door for sex offenders to serve community sentence near their victims. C21, which pretends to address gun violence, but literally only affects people that obey Canada's existing strict firearms laws. C19, which removes any pretense of fiscal control from this undisciplined and unserious government. And C11, a bill that will give the CRTC the power to control what Canadians find and post on the internet. Mr. Speaker, none of these bills will do anything to fix any of Canada's serious problems. If these are the government's priorities for the next 2 weeks, I suggest they quit now and spend the summer coming up with a real agenda to help Canadians.
The honourable member for Ottawa South.
Mr. Speaker, I'm rising today to recognize my constituent and long-time dedicated employee of the House of Commons. Monsieur Claude Saint-Germain, Assistant Sergeant-at-Arms and Risk Management and Investigation Officer, is retiring after 35 years of outstanding service. Monsieur Saint-Germain joined the House of Commons Security Services on September 21st, 1987, moving to Ottawa from his hometown of Sudbury. Au fil des ans, Claude...
Over the years, he rose in the ranks at the House of Commons Security Services, where he was the sergeant of the civil unit before joining the Sergeant of Arms in 2015.
Dedication, commitment, kindness, and vast knowledge of this place is deeply appreciated and will be greatly missed. I ask all my honourable members to join me in thanking Claude for 35 years of unfailing and dedicated service. Merci, Claude.
Thank you, Claude.
Now, before going to the next step, I just want to remind all the honourable members that we cannot do indirectly what we can't do directly. So if there's anything in your questions or your answers, scratch it out now before I have to act. It'll make my life a lot easier. Oral questions. Question orale, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Should be able to trust that what their government tells them is the truth. Telling the truth is especially important when setting the serious precedent of invoking the Emergencies Act. We now know the Minister of Public Safety has been misleading Canadians. No police force asked for the act. He knows it. We all know it. There was no misunderstanding. The Minister has lost credibility and trust. Will the Prime Minister do the right thing and ask the Minister of Public Safety to step away from his duties?
The Honourable Minister.
When illegal blockades paralyzed our economy, hurt workers and communities, police, municipal and provincial leadership told us more tools were needed to bring them to an end. The former Ottawa Police Chief said at the time, "We cannot do it alone, and we're grateful for what they provided, but we need more." And even Alberta's Minister of Municipal Affairs wrote that the local RCMP, quote, "have exhausted all local and regional options. We listened, we determined that the Emergencies Act had the tools necessary to end this, and it worked."
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, there is no misunderstanding, and this is too important to try to skew the words. This is vitally important. No police officers or agencies asked for the act to be invoked. The Minister of Public Safety said that they did. He was not telling the truth. He misled Canadians. He cannot be trusted. He has lost the confidence of this House to do his job. Has he lost the confidence of the Prime Minister? Will the Prime Minister ask him to resign?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Let us be very clear, Mr. Speaker. Law enforcement should never be able to grant themselves extraordinary powers. That's up to government to choose to do, as we did with the Emergencies Act. But once in place, the Emergencies Act allowed police to, according to the Commissioner of the RCMP, refuse entry of individuals traveling to the illegal protest with the intent of participating. It gave police, quote, the power to arrest individuals who continue to supply fuel, food, and other materials, and to compel individuals to provide essential towing services. Canadians remember how the
Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the minister has abdicated and failed in his responsibility to be truthful with Canadians. He is a lawyer and a former federal prosecutor. He knows full well how to choose his words carefully. He knows full well how to be precise in his language. Yet he said over and over again that law enforcement requested the Emergencies Act. Those were his words. We now know his words were not true. How can the Prime Minister have any faith in this minister? Will he ask this minister to resign?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what is crystal clear is how much the Conservative Party is hoping Canadians forget that they stood with the illegal blockaders, that they stood with the people disrupting the daily lives, the economy, the communities of Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Police services needed more tools to deal with these blockades, and that's why we stepped up to protect Canadians. We invoked the Emergencies Act, and it worked, Mr. Speaker, to end these illegal blockades and to keep Canadians safe.
Leader of the Opposition.
Our responsibility, Mr. Speaker, is to stand up for Canadians who have been misled by this minister. Speaker, Canadians were shocked and disgusted to learn that last weekend the Minister of Foreign Affairs sent one of her delegates to share champagne and caviar with Russian diplomats. Mr. Speaker, while Putin and his thugs continue an unjustified and violent war on innocent civilians in Ukraine, can the Prime Minister tell us how in the name of everything that is good did he allow this to happen? We are supposed to be friends of Ukraine. Why did his minister send one of her delegates to party with Russian diplomats who are still being allowed to stay in Canada?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, not a half an hour ago, I got off a 45-minute phone call with President Volodymyr Zelensky to talk about everything Canada has been doing and will continue to do, including by leading conversations at the Summit of the Americas last week, continuing to deliver on toughened sanctions, on more equipment and ammunition. We will continue to step up to support Ukraine. Obviously, it was absolutely unacceptable for any Canadian representative to be at this event. It never should have happened, and we denounce it thoroughly.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, his minister is either incompetent or complicit in what happened, maybe both. Either way, it's a complete failure on behalf of the Liberals. Canadians expect that their Minister of Foreign Affairs will lead by example by condemning and isolating Putin's regime, not sending senior officials to party at the Russian embassy. The Prime Minister and his Foreign Affairs Minister claim to be great friends of Ukraine. I hope he apologized to President Zelensky, because what kind of friend sends a delegate to their enemy's house to enjoy champagne and caviar?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I can assure the Leader of the Opposition and indeed all Canadians that President Zelensky and I had an extremely positive conversation where this issue did not come up, because obviously there are much more important issues, like how we are continuing to deliver munitions that are desperately needed by Ukrainians, how we continue to mobilize international support for Ukraine in condemning Russia, how we continue to engage every single day to stand up for Ukraine, and indeed how Canada is so completely and totally unequivocal in its support for Ukraine and its condemnation of Russia.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, you can easily imagine that I always read the Globe and Mail. And today in the Globe and Mail, we saw that the government's own experts told it that before it published its greenhouse gas emissions reductions targets, that the 2030 targets were completely unrealistic. So it's in full knowledge of the facts that the Minister of the Environment and the Prime Minister made announcements that were simply fake. Can the Prime Minister at least do what he often does, apologize for having misled Quebecers and Canadians? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, our emissions reductions targets are some of the most exhaustive in the world, and they aim to offer Canadians a solid economy and environment. Our plan credibly establishes the contributions that each sector must make in order to enable us to reach our climate targets, including the Climate Institute of Canada, Clean Prosperity, Équiterre, and first-line scientists are all in support of our plan. We promised a realistic and ambitious plan, and that's what we delivered. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. This is climate humor, Mr. Speaker. His own experts, those who he quotes when it suits him, have said that the only way to perhaps reach the targets would be to stop with this fantasy about carbon sequestration and cut funding to the oil and gas industry. Will the Prime Minister do that? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the analysis my dear colleague is referring to was an early comment that did not take into account new measures, investments, and regulations. That is why prestigious organizations like the Canada Business Council and the Petroleum Technology Alliance of Canada, among others, confirm the feasibility of our plan and have projections that are similar to those in our plan. We have the only concrete and real plan to deliver, and that is what I want Canadians to know.
Be South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 1 out of every 4 Canadians in this country has reported that they will not be able to afford their home if interest rates continue to rise. The Bank of Canada estimates that the mortgage payments will increase by 45% by the year 2025. In response, the Liberal government says, well, it's not our fault that inflation is going up. That doesn't cut it. That's not going to help Canadians keep their homes. So will the Prime Minister increase financial supports directly to Canadians by increasing the GST tax credit and the Canadian Child Benefit to help families keep their homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we know full well that housing prices are a real concern, especially for middle-class Canadians hoping to buy their first home. Through Budget 2022, we're making investments to double housing construction this decade, help Canadians buy their first home with extra savings, curb unfair practices that drive up the price of housing, and support the construction of affordable housing. Of course, there's much more work to do, and we're watching interest rates with concern as well, but we will continue to be there for Canadians with housing affordability because that's the strong foundation on which an economy is built.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South. 1 out of 4 Canadians, Mr. Speaker, will not be able to keep their home if interest rates continue to rise. That means that Canadians will lose their home. And the Liberal government is saying that it's not their fault that inflation continues to rise. This shows a lack of leadership. The government must act to help families, and it must do so now. Will the government increase direct financial assistance to families who need it so they can keep their homes? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. As the Honourable Member has said, inflation is a global problem, but we have a responsibility to be there for Canadians who are facing these increasing prices. With housing, it's a real source of concern, especially for middle-class Canadians who are hoping to buy a first property. That is why Budget 2022 has laid out investments to double housing construction over the next decade to help Canadians buy their first property, thanks to a specific savings account, and in order to reduce the speculative practices that are increasing housing prices. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Public Safety has repeatedly said that the serious decision to invoke the Emergencies Act was made at the request of police authorities. All the police forces have denied that they asked for this emergency legislation. The Minister knows it, and as a former Crown Prosecutor, he also knows the importance of telling the truth and nothing but the truth. Since he cannot take back what he said, Mr. Speaker, And since a major civil liberties decision was made as a result, will he now do the honorable thing and resign? The Honorable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we understand our responsibility for public safety, and that is exactly why we invoked the Emergency Measures Act. We sought advice from the police forces. We used their advice to inform our decision to invoke the act. And on the other side, I'd like to know why the Conservative Party has not apologized for their own role in extending the illegal blockades, which was extremely wrong. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Mr. Speaker, the Emergency Measures Act cannot be used when other laws would do the job just fine. The Minister of Public Safety knew this, and that is why he justified his decision by saying repeatedly that the police had asked for these increased powers. Not one police officer, police force, police chief, or commissioner has come forward to confirm the minister's words. There is no misunderstanding here. This Liberal minister no longer has the trust of Canadians. When will he come clean and resign? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the opposition is continuing to ignore the testimony of the RCMP Commissioner. She stated that the RCMP needed the Emergencies Act in order to restore public safety. The RCMP Commissioner said that, yes, the government consulted police forces before invoking the act. The Conservatives, on the other hand, contributed to extending the illegal blockades. It is very wrong. They should apologize.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Public Safety continues to spread misinformation and can't be trusted. As a former Crown prosecutor, the Minister knows full well that his choice of words matters. He would have also known that when invoking the Emergencies Act in Canada, that everything he said would be tested against the law. However, the minister can't find anyone to corroborate his story that law enforcement asked for the Emergencies Act to be invoked. The only matter left unresolved is the minister's resignation. So when will he resign?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Speaker, I want to thank my colleague for highlighting my professional experience as a federal prosecutor before I came into politics. I got into politics to make sure that we could protect Canadians, and on this side of the House, we know what is necessary when it comes to the protection of the health and safety of Canadians. That's why we invoked the Emergencies Act. We obviously consulted police. We sought their advice. You heard the Commissioner say before the committee that we got that advice and we used it, Mr. Speaker, and I just want to know why it is, to this point in time today, the Conservatives refuse to apologize for their role in putting at danger the lives of the people who live in Ottawa and right across the country with their reckless statements.
The Honourable Member for Red Deer-Lacombe.
In 2015, the Prime Minister outlined his ministerial standards of conduct in his Open and Accountable Government document. And let me quote what it said. To be worthy of Canadians' trust, we must always act with integrity. This is not merely a matter of adopting the right rules or of ensuring technical compliance with those rules. As ministers, you and your staff must uphold the highest standards of honesty and impartiality. The Minister of Public Safety no longer meets any of those standards. When will he resign?
Mr. Speaker, I want to be unequivocally clear that we invoke the Emergencies Act amidst an unprecedented act of civil disobedience, in the words of the Canadian Association of the Chiefs of Police, who also said, I might add, that we invoked the Emergencies Act to fill in existing gaps as it related to existing authorities, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if that member would hold the same standard against the comments of the interim CPC leader, who said in the middle of the blockades, let's make this the Prime Minister's problem, let's make it a political problem. That was wrong, she knows it, and she should apologize.
The Honourable Member for Foothills.
What is wrong, Mr. Speaker, is the Liberals froze bank accounts, discarded our democracy, ignored our Charter of Rights, all predicated on a fabrication. Invoking the Emergencies Act was an unprecedented power grab, all based on misinformation. No police force ever asked for the Emergencies Act to be invoked. The fact is, the Public Safety Minister has been caught misleading Parliament and deceiving Canadians. Will he do the honourable thing? Will he do the right thing? Will he resign?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, if that member had read the Emergencies Act, he would have seen that all of the measures that we introduced were charter compliant and were absolutely targeted towards an unprecedented act of civil disobedience, which the Conservatives continue to deny. And it is they who are engaging in revisionism, Mr. Speaker. It is they who engaged in reckless abandon, who, while Ottawa residents were unable to go to work, take their kids to childcare, were able to navigate the city, they were encouraging blockaders to double down. They put at risk the lives of the people in the city. It's wrong. They should apologize.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for Foothills.
Here's the fact, Mr. Speaker. On April 28th, the Public Safety Minister said, it is also a fact that we only invoke the emergencies after all police forces agreed. We don't believe him, Canadians don't believe him, and police forces don't believe him. They don't believe him because this never happened. No police force ever asked for the Emergency Act to be invoked. What has happened, and this is the fact, Mr. Speaker, is the Public Safety Minister has been caught misleading Canadians and misleading Parliament. No more talking points, no more skirting the blame. Will he do the right thing? Will he resign?
The Honourable Minister.
Talk about disinformation. Talk about a distortion of the record. You heard from the Commissioner of the RCMP who went before a committee and said that she needed to use the Emergencies Act to get the job done as quickly as possible. She spoke about the consultation between government and police forces to ensure that we use their advice to make that decision in an informed way, Mr. Speaker. And it is the Conservatives who continue to bury their heads in the sand in what was an unprecedented moment of civil disobedience. We worked with law enforcement to protect public safety. It was the Conservatives who undermined it.
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, internal documents obtained by the Globe and Mail revealed that when the minister announced his 2030 greenhouse gas reduction plan, he knew he was headed for failure. He knew his department was projecting that the oil and gas industry would reach only 53% of its 2030 reduction targets. He knew that the only way they could meet the target was to cut their production. But he refused to require that. So he knew that he was publishing a plan doomed to failure. Why did the minister mislead Quebecers? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. I completely disagree with her characterization of the situation. Our plan is ambitious but realistic. And it shows sector by sector how Canada will meet its objectives. It's the most transparent plan in the history of the country, and that's not what I'm saying, it's what a number of NGOs and experts have said. The Globe and Mail analysis was one of several initial internal contributions, but the analysis does not bear in mind all of the new contributions and investments and regulations that were proposed. Environment Canada has organized several technical briefings with experts, external experts. We have showed total transparency about how we came up with our numbers. Thank you. Before going to the next question, I'd like to remind everyone that there are a lot of discussions happening, and it makes it hard to hear.
Different discussions taking place, and it's nice to see people get along and talk, but maybe please either whisper lower or maybe just temporarily take it out and come back for it in a moment or so. The
Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, imagine this. His own department demonstrated this in the leaked documents. The only way the oil and gas industry can get closer to a reduction of 81 megatons by 2030 is to cut production. Yet despite knowing this, the minister is not only not asking them to cut production, but he's increasing production. Yep, 1 week after tabling his plan, he approved the Baie du Nord project. He used to be an environmentalist. What would an environmentalist call a minister who tables such a plan knowing that he has no credibility? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I would invite my colleague to read the whole Globe and Mail article, not just the headline, but the whole thing, because in it, 2 experts are quoted, and have stated that what we're asking the oil industry is ambitious, what we want to do is ambitious, and I would have thought that the Bloc Québécois is in favor of ambition in fighting climate change. This plan is based on consultation with 30,000 Canadians, and it's been supported by a number of organizations like Environmental Defense, Équiterre, the David Suzuki Foundation, and many others. And our government will ensure that this plan is implemented to ensure that Canada reaches its objectives. The Honourable Member for Avignon-Amici-Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, the Minister keeps saying that the increase in production will not affect his plan, but his own department warns otherwise. And what's worse is that the Minister isn't even considering the number of additional barrels. When he approved the Bédunor project, it was supposed to be 300 million barrels. Last week, it went up to 500 million, and it's expected to go up again to 1 billion barrels. But the Minister keeps saying that no matter how many barrels, it's going just fine. It's going to be carbon neutral. Green oil, Mr. Speaker, is this magical thinking or just false? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would invite my honourable colleague to read the latest inventory for Canada's greenhouse gas emissions. It shows that in 2019, despite an increase in oil production of 700,000 barrels in Canada, compared to 2018, greenhouse gas emissions went down that year. And greenhouse gas emissions went down in 2020 as well. All that shows that our plan is working. We have decided to address pollution. We will reach nearly 45% in reduction in methane emissions by 2025, and we want to bring that up to 75% by 2030, which is the most ambitious goal on the planet.
Member for Barrie Innisfil.
On multiple occasions, the Minister of Public Safety said that police forces had requested the Emergencies Act. We now know that that wasn't true. Even worse, the minister doubled down on his false claims on multiple occasions in this House, in committee, and in the media. He even sent his deputy minister to committee to try to clean up his mess, saying he was misunderstood. There's no misunderstanding here. He knows exactly what he did. He misled Canadians, and he knows that there must be consequences. Mr. Speaker, will he do the honourable thing, the right thing, and announce his resignation today?
Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
I'm very happy to double down on the truth, which is on this side of the House. And the truth of the matter is that an unprecedented moment occurred last winter when we saw blockades at ports of entry. We saw people put out of work. We saw families hurt. We saw lives endangered. And we took the decision that was necessary, as informed by the consultation and advice that we got from police services, as you heard the Commissioner of the RCMP say at committee. I just don't understand why it is that to this moment the Conservatives refuse to accept their egregious role in extending the danger that was put at public safety as a result of comments made during that unprecedented moment. They should apologize.
Member for Barrie Innisfil.
What's critical here, Mr. Speaker, is getting to the truth, because the truth is critical for the parliamentary committee investigating the invocation of the Act. The truth is also critical for the judicial inquiry charged with investigating the rationale of invoking the Act. What's known as the truth has been corrupted by the Minister of Public Safety. He knows his words matter. Making false claims, trying to justify invoking the Emergencies Act matters. It matters a lot. So will he do the right thing, the honourable thing, and resign?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the only honourable thing is for that member to look his interim Conservative Party leader of Canada and ask her to resile from the comments that she made during the illegal blockades, which put at risk public safety. It is an absolutely egregious thing to have done, Mr. Speaker, and on this side, we were working 24/7 with law enforcement to protect Canadians. It was the Conservatives who put their safety at risk. That was wrong, and they should apologize.
Well, member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Well, the minister talks about things being egregious and unprecedented, and what's unprecedented is the lengths that this minister will go to spread his disinformation and to continue to try and divide and stigmatize people that this government disagrees with. This is their pattern, to try and punish Canadians that disagree with them. On April 26th, he said it was the advice of law enforcement that he followed to invoke the Emergencies Act, but we know that's not true. We heard it directly from police. So will the minister come clean with Canadians, tell them that invoking emergency powers was actually a Liberal power grab, and resign today?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
It is astonishing to hear that member ask that question when I have repeatedly cited from law enforcement community leaders who said that they needed the Emergencies Act, that it helped to restore public safety, and that it helped to fill in existing gaps on authorities which were ineffective at restoring public safety, Mr. Speaker. And it is that member who should be looking right down the aisle at his interim Conservative Party leader who actually undermined public safety as a result of comments by trying to make it a political problem for the Prime Minister. That was fundamentally wrong. They are soft on crime, they are weak on law and order, and they should apologize.
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, this minister's answers just aren't credible. If it was so unsafe, they continue to let all parliamentarians, all staff, continue to come into the precinct.
Exactly.
Speaker, this minister has lost absolutely all credibility.
I'm going to have to interrupt the honourable member. I'm hearing shouting back and forth, and I'm having a hard time hearing the question. From the top, please.
Speaker, this minister has lost all credibility. He says it was so unsafe, but they continue to let all parliamentarians, ministers, the Prime Minister, residents of downtown Ottawa to continue to come down here. The risk that Canadians have is a minister and a cabinet that are spreading misinformation. We have a minister that refuses to take accountability and instead divides and stigmatizes Canadians, looking to pit neighbor against neighbor and government against Canadian if they don't agree with him. So will the minister do the honourable thing, stand before this House, deliver to this Prime Minister his resignation today?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, June 14th, and the Conservatives have still buried their heads in the sand about what is necessary to protect the health and safety of Canadians. That's why we invoked the Emergencies Act. We sought and consulted with the police forces before we took that decision, Mr. Speaker, and it is the Conservatives who undermine public safety. And to this moment, what they should do is they should take a mirror and they should take a hard look at themselves at the way in which they contributed to the undermining of public safety. It was wrong, and there should be an apology today.
The Honourable Member for Timmins, James Bay.
So internal documents show that the government knew the Prime Minister's net zero reduction plan had net zero chance of meeting its emissions targets. Well, quelle surprise. Remember when the Prime Minister went to COP26 and promised the world that he would bring in an emissions cap? Then he came back to Canada and promoted massive oil increases through Bay du Nord and TMX. The planet is on fire, and generations of Canadians will pay the price for his inability to deliver a credible plan on just transition or the emissions cap. Doesn't the Prime Minister understand this?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What strikes me is that the member doesn't seem to have read the 2030 emissions reduction plan, because it's a plan to reduce our emissions by 40 to 45%, the plan to net zero to 2050 plan, Mr. Speaker, and that plan is coming. So if he had read the 2030 plan, the member opposite would see that we have, for the first time in the history of this country, shown how we get to our 2030 targets per sector, and that has been validated by a number of experts, including ex-leader of the Green Party, BC Green Party, IPCC scientist, and a number of other experts across the country, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are facing a disaster at the border. Preventable staff shortages are causing endless delays at our land crossings. Small businesses are suffering and Canadians can't travel. The NDP has called for a safe border task force since the beginning of the pandemic that will work with all sectors to relieve this pressure, but the Liberals have refused and has led to confusion and frustration. These problems are not going away. Will this government finally put together a safe border task force that will help Canadian travelers and businesses?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
I want to thank my honourable colleague for raising this important issue. I know that he speaks on behalf of his constituents in a border committee, which I'm very familiar with. Of course, the government is committed to collaborating with my honourable colleague to set up this force and to use other existing platforms to ensure that we have smooth flow of commercial goods and manufacturing goods, while at the same time protecting the integrity of our borders. And I also want to thank my colleague for his advocacy during the illegal blockades. He, unlike like the Conservatives, understood that there was an unprecedented act of civil disobedience, and it was thanks to his collaboration and all of the members on this side of the House that we were able to restore public safety. No thanks to Conservatives.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil, Charlemagne.
Finally. Mr. Speaker, as always, many Canadians are looking forward to summer, one of the best times of the year to be outdoors with family and friends. But as firefighters in many of our communities are warning us, we are also entering wildfire season. And thanks to the impacts of climate change, Canadians are at a greater risk than ever before. Can the Minister for Emergency Preparedness explain to this chamber what is the federal government doing to help communities at risk? Thank you.
Minister for Emergency Preparedness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd also like to thank my honourable colleague for this very important question. Our government shares the concern that we all share, for increasing severity and frequency of wildfires as well as all natural disasters. And Mr. Speaker, that's why we've invested through Budget 2022 over $550 million to help provinces, territories, and Indigenous communities mitigate and respond to wildfires that threaten their community. This includes equipment for firefighters and training that specifically incorporates Indigenous traditional knowledge in fire management. And Mr. Speaker, throughout the coming fire season, we will continue to work with our provincial and territorial partners, and we are prepared to act in response to any request for assistance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, Andrew Coyne of the Globe and Mail said, and I quote, "If the Liberals were trying to convince people that they had something to hide with regard to the decision to invoke the Federal Emergencies Act, they could hardly do a better job." The situation is serious. The Minister of Public Safety has misled Canadians, and he must resign. Will he? Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we have nothing to hide. We're very proud of the work this government did during the illegal blockade. It was an unprecedented situation. And yes, when we were making that decision, we consulted, we spoke to law enforcement, but it was the Conservatives who created a threat to public safety with their rhetoric and the remarks of the interim leader. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the same Andrew Coyne said, and I quote, "Well, there's a penalty for this sort of thing, and the penalty in the conventions of Westminster-style parliaments is resignation." He misled Canadians. Now, as with the story of Jody Wilson-Raybould, it's possible that she at least had principles, but the minister doesn't. When will the Honourable resign? Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we did the work that was necessary during an unprecedented situation. We sought advice, we spoke to law enforcement before invoking the Emergencies Act, and it was the Conservatives who created a threat during this illegal blockade. They should look in the mirror and apologize for their remarks during the blockade. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-Chemin-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, on April 26th, the Minister of Public Safety said this about emergency measures, and I quote, "I don't want to speak for all members of law enforcement, but there was a very strong consensus on the need to invoke the Act." End of quote. We now know that at no time was there such a consensus. He misled Canadians. He no longer deserves their trust. Will the Minister do the honourable thing, apologize, and resign? The Honourable Minister. It's incredible that the members didn't listen to what the leaders of law enforcement said about the situation and about the decision to invoke the Act. It was the Association of the Canadian Chiefs of Police who said that the Emergencies Act was necessary to restore public safety. They were the ones who helped inform our decision during this process. And it's the Conservatives who should apologize for their role during the blockade. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-Chemin-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, being a minister is a heavy responsibility. The minister said many times, quote, "It was only after we received the advice of law enforcement that we invoked the Emergencies Act," end of quote. Yet the law enforcement agencies he refers to never asked for these drastic measures. As Rex Murphy of the National Post said, "In the interest of integrity, the minister should resign." What's he waiting for?
Tout s'en vient très bien aujourd'hui.
Things are going well today, and I'd like that to continue, so I will let the Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Chemin-Lévis finish her question. My question is very simple, Mr. Speaker. He misled the House. He needs to apologize and resign. That's it. The Honourable Minister. No. The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Official Languages told La Presse that her Bill C-13 is a carbon copy of Quebec's Bill 96 regarding enterprises under federal jurisdiction. It would be a serious mistake to believe this. Bill 96 provides for the application of the Charter of the French language to all businesses in Quebec. Bill C-13, on the other hand, gives businesses the right to voluntarily apply the Charter of the French language. The minister knows the difference between being obliged to use French and being able to choose between using English or French at work. Why is she misleading Quebecers? The Honourable Minister of Official Languages. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. What's a serious mistake now is that the Bloc Québécois didn't work with us to move forward with C-13. This bill was set up to ensure that our beautiful language is promoted and protected. The Bloc and the government of Quebec both want to protect this beautiful language. So I don't understand why the Bloc and the members of the opposition don't want to work with us to make sure that we get this bill passed as quickly as possible. The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. Well, the minister would like to have us believe that, but in fact she was right yesterday when she said, and I quote, "Let's be very clear, the only minority language in Canada is French." Those are her words, Mr. Speaker. But then why does her bill, C-13, protect the majority language, English? Why does it give the Air Canadas of the world the choice to operate in English in Quebec if they want to? Why does she give these companies the choice to circumvent the Charter of the French language? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I said yesterday, French is declining in North America, including across Canada. And yes, Mr. Speaker, French is the only minority language in Canada. That's why we're moving forward with an ambitious bill. We all want to protect and promote this beautiful language. Once again, I hope that the Bloc Québécois and all members of the opposition will work with us and stop playing political games, because this bill will make a real difference. And the new version of the bill has even more teeth, so I hope they'll help us get it passed.
Well, member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, the minister is desperate to blame someone else, but there is only one person that is under investigation, and that's the Minister of Public Safety. Now, the state of his credibility is grievous and irremediable. It is completely untenable to have a Minister of Public Safety who misleads the public about advice he is receiving from the police. Respectfully, so that his important office can be filled by someone that the public can trust, will the minister please resign?
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to inform the colleague, as I have on many occasions, that we invoked the Emergencies Act because it was necessary. We invoked the Emergencies Act because on this side of the House, we know what it takes to protect the health and safety of Canadians. It's Conservatives who need to take a hard look in the mirror and really reflect on the way in which they put at risk public safety by trying to make it a political problem for the Prime Minister. We will never apologize, Mr. Speaker, for doing what we needed to do, which was invoke the Emergencies Act, yes, after consulting and yes, seeking the advice of police, as you heard the Commissioner of the RCMP say before committee.
Well, member for Calgary Midland-Core.
Mr. Speaker, there is only one person that is under investigation, and that is the Minister of Public Safety. The minister broke the law. The minister continues to mislead Canadians about why the government invoked the Emergencies Act. On May 2nd, he said, at the recommendation of police, we invoked the Emergencies Act to protect Canadians. We know now that it was never requested. So will the minister acknowledge that he deceived Canadians about his actions and resign from his position?
Honourable Minister.
Here we are again, and Canadians should pay very close attention to the language that is being used by Conservatives, saying that there's some investigation which does not exist. They know that. And I'll tell you something else. This is consistent with a pattern of behavior of reckless abandon when it comes to public safety. When it comes to the economy, perhaps Canadians should buy themselves out of affordability issues with cryptocurrency. How does that sound today? Not so great, Mr. Speaker. I'll tell you something. We know what it takes to protect Canadians, and we will always do what's necessary. Thank you.
The honourable member for Calgary-Vindapore.
Only one person that is under investigation, and that is
Theater at the best.
The honourable member for Calgary-Vindapore from the top, please.
there is only one person that is under investigation, and that is the Minister of Public Safety. The minister broke the law. How can Canadians be expected to trust this minister when he continues to spread misinformation about the Emergencies Act? The minister said that invoking the Emergencies Act was on the recommendation of authorities, but it has been confirmed by law enforcement that it was not, in fact, true. So will the minister take accountability for his words and resign?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I know my colleague enjoys certain privileges in this House, which allows her to be rather reckless and loose with language. I invite her to say those words outside of this House. I scarcely think she would, because she knows it's not true, Mr. Speaker, and I invite the House to actually encourage her to retract those words. It debases the importance of this debate. We will always do what is necessary to protect the health and safety of Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Louis. Mr. Speaker, the Minister responsible for the Economic Development Agency of Canada for the regions of Quebec announced last Friday over $40 million for the tourism industry in Quebec. For example, there's the Augustine Monastery in Quebec City, which will receive $100,000 to modernize its facilities. There will also be a 72-room hotel in Lachute, which will receive $1 million in financial assistance to help it get off the ground and support the local industry. Can the minister update this House on the measures that will support Quebecers and the tourism sector? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague from Lac-Saint-Louis for his question, and I'd also like to acknowledge his great work on behalf of the citizens of his riding. Tourism represents $102 billion in economic activity in this country, 1.8 million jobs, 2% of Canada's GDP. These figures demonstrate the importance of the tourism industry to Canada's economy. There are many projects across Quebec that will benefit from this funding. We know that the pandemic is continuing to hit the sector hard, and that's why we are strongly supporting them, and we will always be there to do so.
Member for Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, this minister continues to spread misinformation and cannot be trusted. Like me, the minister was a lawyer in his prior life. We both taught in a law school. I taught about the necessity of being honest. I trust he was honest with the courts. Being honest with Parliament is even more important. He repeatedly told this House law enforcement requested the Emergencies Act. They didn't. This misled Canadians. Will he resign?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, all we've heard today in the exhibit of the trial of who can tell the truth and who can is the Conservatives who have deliberately continued to mislead on what has been said in this House on the state of affairs last winter when there was an unprecedented act of civil disobedience, on the fact that the government, yes, consulted police, yes, sought their advice prior to the invocation of the Emergencies Act, as you heard the RCMP, Mr. Speaker, say before the committee. That's what's gone on today, and they should be apologizing for their role in prolonging those blockades. It's wrong.
I just want to remind the Honourable Minister that in the House we can say someone is misleading someone. That's an accident. People do that. That's normal. But deliberately misleading is not acceptable language in the House. The Honourable Member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
I'll expect the apology afterwards. How dare this minister wag his finger at me given his conduct in this House, Mr. Speaker. This minister needs to stop diverting, stop deflecting, and start divulging. He said law enforcement asked for the Emergencies Act. They didn't. He misled Canadians and put his own integrity into question. Will he offer his resignation today? Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, I'm somewhat entertained by my honourable colleague who complains about wagging fingers and then proceeds to wag fingers to the government. He ought to live up to the high standards that he purports to set for us, which includes being very straight up with his interim Conservative Party of Canada leader who made recklessly abandonment statements during the blockade.
Question answer again.
Can I ask again, Speaker?
Ready? Order. Order. I just want to make sure everything's calm now. Now we want to hear the question from the Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Well, Speaker, let me update the minister. His use of the Emergencies Act is subject to a judicial inquiry and a parliamentary committee. The minister is misleading Canadians. The minister has been misleading Parliament. He is undermining Canadians' confidence in democracy and in our justice system. He has had all of question period. He has many months to finally come to the realization of what he's done. He's misled Canadians. He's misled Parliament. It's time to resign. Will the minister resign?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we're very, very confident on this side of the House that the invocation of the Emergencies Act helped to restore public safety, helped to ensure that Canadians could get back to work, helped ensure that family members could take their kids to daycare, and ensured that we could restore public safety, Mr. Speaker. We will always, always defend that decision. We will never apologize for doing what is necessary, and it is the Conservatives who have some serious atoning to do after their performance today in question period.
The Honourable Member for Surrey Centre.
Mr. Speaker, we have witnessed the devastating effects of gun violence in Canada. My constituents in Surrey Centre are no different. As violence increases, we find ourselves relying on programs such as the Surrey Anti-Gang Family Empowerment Program, which provides a coordinated approach to address youth gang violence. Recently, in a survey conducted by my office, my constituents identified community safety and crime prevention as the issues of greatest importance. Can the minister please update the House on how strengthening gun violence will keep our communities safe?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, I want to thank my colleague for the question and all of his hard work and leadership on keeping our communities safe. As he knows and all members know, we've introduced Bill C-21, which, among other things, will introduce a national handgun freeze, which will take on, yes, organized crime by raising maximum sentences for illegal traffickers and by reversing the alarming trend around the connection between domestic violence and guns. Mr. Speaker, it is my sincere hope that we'll be able to work with all members, and yes, maybe, who knows, the Conservatives too. We live in hope, Mr. Speaker, so that we can better protect all Canadians from the scourge of gun violence. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, Indigenous women, girls, and diverse gendered individuals continue to experience high rates of violence, go missing, and murdered. Yet, out of the $724.1 million allocated for the violence prevention strategy announced in 2020, guess how much the Liberals have spent? Zero. I have something that they can spend it on, an adequate $24 tax money while people continue to lose their life?
Full Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the violence that we've seen in Winnipeg is absolutely heartbreaking. Too many vulnerable women, girls, Two-Spirit, LGBTQIA plus people have lost their lives. And frankly, Mr. Speaker, one person is too many. The work of frontline organizations like Velma's House are absolutely essential. They are literally saving lives. We are working across government to find immediate solutions for a 24/7 safe space because we know, Mr. Speaker, time is of the essence.
Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, the new UN report on the occupied Palestinian territory in Israel has alarming findings. Increased discrimination, ongoing human rights abuses, and a deepening asymmetrical conflict where Israel clearly has no intention of ending the illegal occupation. This adds to the list of reputable reports that this government is ignoring. Human rights are human rights everywhere in the world. The cycle of violence will continue as long as this government stays silent. Why won't the government even consider this United Nations report and revisit its policy towards Palestine and Israel?
Yes. The Honourable Minister, or the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it gives me again an honor to talk about the steadfast friendship that we have with Israel. We are a friend and ally of Israel, and we are a friend of the Palestinian people. And in that context, we are committed to the goal of a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East. We know that that is not easy. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes commitment, but that always will include the creation of a Palestinian state living side by side in peace with Israel. This is consistent with Canada's long-standing position. We'll continue to work with every member of this House to make that vision a reality. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have. C'est tout le temps que nous avons. I wish to draw your attention of members to the presence in the gallery of Her Excellency Elżbieta Witek, Marshal of the Sejm of the Republic of Poland, accompanied by a delegation including Deputy Marshal of the Senate. Orders of the day.
Government bills, Commons.
Bill C5, an act to amend the Criminal Code, and on the amendment of Ms. Dancho.
The Honourable Member. The Honourable Member for Kamloops, Thompson Caribou, I believe, has 2 minutes and 2 minutes and 30 seconds left for the debate. We might have to wait a second here just to calm things down. I just want to remind everyone that the Honourable Member for Kamloops, Thompson Caribou is about to speak, and I'm sure we all want to hear what he has to say.
Well, maybe not, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member.
I apologize, Mr. Speaker, for calling you Your Honour. I'm not sure if you caught that. Mr. Speaker, I only have 2.5 minutes left in my speech on Bill C5. The point I want to emphasize to this House is this. There's a middle ground. We've talked about what the government wishes to accomplish, and then we've considered how should the government go about accomplishing it.